welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and star, earth, sky, tongue, and spirit through weekly astrological forecasts. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. December 17th marks the occasion of Roman Saturnalia. And more than most years, there is a particular cause for the reversal of wisdom and the opening of license here, as the period we are headed into is one more Saturnian than usual, as planets seem to proceed into the cold and dry, one's time into ice skater synchronization. Even the word is befitting, the organization of being in sync with Saturn, old Kronos himself, who rules over time. And so it is, in a way, an organization of time itself, so that cycles sync up, and so we find ourselves well prepared. Interestingly, it is often one of Kronos' nemesises who is attributed to foresight, that being Prometheus, whereas Kronos seems more in line with Epimetheus, being one that tends to look into the past, and with the log in hand dictates the recorded results that preceded in the ages, demanding that we learn from our mistakes and then improve. Today, classically Saturnalia, the territory of Capricorn remains empty save for the specter of the underworld, who waits in the 18th degree and beckons us in, signaling to the abundance of Sagittarian planets through the anticial mirror. Currently, heavy energy and signification of the centaur prevails. Travel, foreignness, the exotic, the truth, the ideal, philosophy, synthesis of human and animal nature, motivational optimism, fly with the eagles, the poster reads or uttered by a motivational speaker. We just gotta get this done. We gotta get to see the bigger picture from new heights like an eagle on high. We've got to be as strong as a bull and as fast as a horse to finish this project and achieve our goals, etc., etc. This is very later Sagittarius, which has to do with the final push at the end of the long haul. As Venus progressed into the third phase of Sagittarius, she attracts us to passions of epic proportion, the love of facing insurmountable adversity, passionate or in love with legendary crusading. If it's not epic, it's not appealing. The new moon occurs at 1 a.m., so essentially this is late Sunday night. There may be some roughness to the feeling of this lunation, as Luna is in a Saturn-ruled decan, and comes conjunct Saturn only hours after meeting the Sun, proceeding into detriment in Capricorn. A feeling of needing to rise to the task and a need to meet demands is presented with inflexible restrictions and then brought down to earth, the reality of the matter, where the only way to proceed is through tangible animalistic instincts, as in a crisis situation. This quickly exhausts all resources, drains stores of energy, but must be prolonged perpetually, regardless, as there is no alternative to survival. Although the mansion which hosts our new moon speaks of strengthening buildings, increasing harvests, making and holding profits, and traveling safely through the countryside, as well as separating wives from their proper husbands. Sounds like the situation of, we did it, we succeeded, but it nearly killed us, and we can barely stand each other now, but at least we accomplished what we set out to do. Agrippa says one name of this mansion, Albadalk, means a defeat, which sheds some paradoxical light on the experience of accomplishment at all costs. Consider all the aforementioned as seed form of this lunation, but also being a final lunation before the solstice, and the one that inaugurates Saturn's return to rulership and the Sun's stroll into Capricorn, as well as the annual Sun-Saturn conjunction, or new Saturn, as Saturn returns to his domicile, making it a very new Saturn, also a Saturn's back. All of this current Sagittarian energy mirrors into and reflects back from Capricorn territory through Anticia, so there's a heavy near future and distant past dynamic that is feedback looped into itself in multiple ways. We don't get much time to enjoy Saturnalia, so tell your boss to screw, get wasted, and demand some money from royalty while you can, unless you are a boss or an aristocrat. Then screw you, give me $1,000. The freshly waxing yet still dark moon conjoined Saturn in the final degrees of Sagittarius at 8 a.m. We find ourselves in preamble, preparing to perceive the desire to meet expectations and complete tasks, when suddenly we slam into inescapable commitments to do so. This is not a jovial or jolly aspect, but with Mars and Scorpio simultaneously, this looks like a lot of whip-cracking ourselves to get stuff done and live up to our projections before our superiors or dominators do so for us. This can manifest as a kind of literal self-cursing. I will not leave this room under any circumstances until this ship in the bottle is finished. I will not rest until all political prisoners are set free. On December 19th, as the moon conjoins Pluto at 10 p.m., Luna, gaining a sliver of light, comes face to face with Hades and peers into the void of the underworld. The rape of Persephone comes to mind. This could easily trigger a feeling that the recesses of corruption in society are far too deep to sound, which sets a very moody ambiance, and like wicked clockwork, that of a macabre cuckoo maker, Saturn enters Capricorn only an hour later at 11 p.m. This marks Saturn's return to his domicile after almost 24 years. But that was since he left Aquarius last in January of 1994. The last time he made the ingress into Capricorn was in November of 1988, though he had dipped in previously in February of that year before turning retrograde. Saturn is his most conservative in Capricorn, and the harsh laws of nature are primary. Often fasting, rationing, limitations, and sanctions become necessary. My guess is this will not be in favor of the flamboyant, anti-ecological bunch we politically call conservatives, but the inception of uncomfortable yet necessary restrictions on resources and pollutants, such as fuel. In 6 years, we may not be any longer able to freely burn as much fuel as we can afford, for example, but I wouldn't be surprised if something like this was a literal result, each individual only allowed to consume a set amount per person. This is another permutation of the word, not conservative, but conservation. Saturn's return to his Earth sign, which is his yin domicile, may look at the same state of the world since 1991, and receptive to what it sees, decide that there is to be some reckoning. This is also typically more minimal, gritty, and somber period for art and entertainment, and maybe especially so as Jupiter is currently in Scorpio. A quick look at art and music and cinema from 1989 reveals death, darkness, the black and white, decaying cities, ecological concerns as forward in the material. The starkness of the first Tim Burton Batman, the black and white artwork of Nirvana's Bleach, Christopher Walken in King of New York, concurrent with Exxon Valdez and the falling of the Berlin Wall. On personal as well as collective levels, Saturn's return to Capricorn should be a time of disciplined construction, assessment of life architecture, cautious behavior, or the punishment of breaches into excess, a more down-to-earth attitude and approach, a reality check, the testing of sturdiness and enduring form within our lives, harsh edits and heavy restraints, a focus on foundation and building from ground up, monumental works, masterpieces, stark and skeletal aesthetics, the bare bones of things, attention to the quality of materials, the institution of hierarchy, the stratification and regulation of society. Saturn is in Capricorn for 3 years and then Aquarius for another 3. So we ready ourselves now for 6 years of Saturn in rulership. Hope you have a good and wild Saturnalia. On December 20th, Venus catches up to the 24th degree and is next to square Chiron and trine Uranus. Her volcanic passions and magnetism to precarious escapades harmonizes with seditious individuality and volatile revelation, but causes friction with the act of letting go, and the emotional imagination may romanticize what it is decapitating. The pain of releasing old loves and outmoded aesthetics as paradigms shatter, or difficulty being able to drop the revolutionary zealousness, even for an instant. When the revolution achieves what it desires, what do people do with their affection for passionate anger? This hits both a contrary and complementary note to those stuck by Saturn and the Sun. and results may be brooding and striving all at once, symphonic in the mode of Rachmaninoff. On December 21st, as the sun enters Capricorn, we reach the winter solstice, one of the legitimate markers of the next astrological cycle. This is more than a typical solstice with Saturn in the house, making for a period that's highly Capricornian. As our vision enters the winter phase, we assess, will we survive? Do we have enough firewood, stores of food? Can the roof withstand the snow load? Are the walls thick and the windows tight? Basically, have we planned well enough and built sturdy enough? Everyone's place in the hierarchy will be organized according to this criteria. Not surprising, most people meet up with family just after the solstice annually to compare notes, a sort of economic status show and tell. Of course, the original essence of solstice is otherwise. Capricorn and Cancer make the solstitial axis, the places where the two underworld rivers intersect, that of the sun's path, the ecliptic, and that of the Milky Way, whose light is made up of so many souls, those of humans having lost their bodies. 0 degrees Cancer is where the Mithraic torchbearers, Caudopetes, holds his torch up as the sun reaches its northernmost height, and man may manifest descending from above. At 0 degrees Capricorn, the rivers intersect at the most southerly point, and man may exit manifestation and proceed to the heavens. Here the torchbearer Cautes points his torch down as the sun is low in the sky. This is when Sirius reaches its greatest southern declination, and being the dog star is also Cerberus, guarding the entrance and exit to the underworld as the boat of the sun carries souls to the switching points between one river and the other, a watery crossroads, and indeed the axis is of earth and water, nocturnal and thus yin, while the equinoctial axis of Aries and Libra, spring and autumn equinox, is of fire and air, and is thus diurnal and yang. Mithraeus saw Mithras as spanning the equinoctial, while his torch-bearing attendees guarded the southern and northern gates of the either side. This is also in part where the Western occult tradition gains its 4 kings, exemplified in the zodiacal crossroads. Indeed, we later see permutations of the headless rite, concluding with offerings to the cardinal spirits, and elsewhere, whether in the Hermetic literature or in the Goetia, the headless spirit is associated with the first decan of Capricorn, where he anatomically presides over the knees. On solstice, we may curtsy, bow, or genuflect in chthonic fashion to one of the primary and most ancient spirits that man has ever known, and to the southerly direction of his correspondence, as well as to directionality in general, as Sirius arcs over from southeast to southwest, following Orion, as the cat claws or the dog nips at the breeches of the Taurus fool, herding him toward conflict with Taurus, and we witness the Mithraic tauroctony play out before our very eyes just in time for Christmas. The fact that there is a gate of excarnation opening for ascension to heaven as the sun descends to the lowest point of zenith marks the paradoxical rising and falling of the occasion, the going up and coming down. The awareness put into your knees and feet that allow you to then scale hierarchies and stack up stones to new heights. Along with this, of course, is the sudden growing of light rather than lessening, and in this dynamic is the mythological birth of all manner of deities associated with light, as well as gods who succumb to death and darkness across many traditions in the northern hemisphere. Osiris, Baal, Attis, Adonis, Helios, Apollo, Dionysus, Mithras, Jesus, Baldur, Frey. Once with Capricorn territory, the sun promptly conjoins Saturn at 4 p.m., thus beginning a new solar Saturn cycle. This is the inauguration of a new cycle of boundaries and restrictions. As Saturn, burned up by the sun's light and heat, is purified, they come together and synthesize intentions. Strict Saturn receives his orders from our solar sovereign. Saturn is sure to make a big splash in his own territory, but the true weight of this might not be realized until the sun gets some distance from him and he can again become visible in the sky. We hear the seconds click like guillotine falls. The moon at the time of the conjunction is also in a Saturnian sign, over in Aquarius, so the sight and feel of what Saturn has in store for us on our shoulders is as well in our minds. On December 22nd, as if in response to the big event, Mercury turns direct at 7 p.m. As with any direct station, travel, technological undertakings, and regular communications can now resume with relative confidence. Although his Mercury is still in detriment, he will be confusing things slightly, or in some cases more heavily, despite his restoration of forward motion. Generally, though, as Mercury retraces his steps through a territory he had previously tread prior to retrograde, he is less likely to fall into traps or pitfalls that may have ensnared him on the first round. In mid-Sagittarius, this is probably a double checking that his facts are straight before he clicks on the mic and makes his speech, even if the language is still designed to convince the crowd to support his cause. This is like a book whose argument is not objective, but heavily leads the reader while still being well footnoted and with an impressive bibliography. An improvement to his first pass, but not the best spot for our messenger. The messages he delivers are pronounced in a tone of voice that suggests a bias, but with him direct, you are at least getting your mail. All right, welcome back, Bonnie.
Hello.
And also, we want to welcome back Suzanne Stone to the show.
Hello.
How are you
Good
doing?
to be back.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a pretty dreamy evening.
Yeah.
Relaxing by the wood stove.
Yeah. And then so, we're
In our respective igloos.
Oh yeah,
our
at the moment. Not.
Yeah, just so the listeners know, we're not in one igloo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're recording previously, so, but for the listeners, this is going to be broadcast on Saturnalia. So, Bona Saturnalia.
Bona Saturnalia.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So everyone's wearing their clothes backwards and like kicking their boss down the stairs and like toilet papering his house or her house.
Yeah. Very modern.
Yeah.
Very modern. Yeah. I was just caught up in the patriarchy. But not on Saturnalia.
Was that like string of toilet paper stuck to your stiletto as you like exited the men's room?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, been there.
Probably the trees are also rebelling against us for all the toilet paper we use.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the trees are coming into our houses and snatching our toilet paper.
Reclaiming.
Yeah, they're adorning themselves with it.
Refurbishing.
Like, we are beautiful.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, 5 planets in Sagittarius.
Yeah, very Sagittarian energy. And we were talking about this right before we hit record. It's very, a lot of preoccupation with travel and with the exotic and the foreign. And that's a part of Sagittarius because it's Jupiter ruled. It's mind expanding. It's the expanding of your coherence of the world, and it's kind of like through doing and achieving and accomplishing and moving forward with things, you come to greater and greater understanding and philosophies. But yeah, definitely Sagittarius wants to go. It wants to be fast. It wants to move and create a vehicle for movement. So that was probably a good time, Suzanne, for you all to be on tour.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we definitely also felt the Mercury retrograde pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, and for people who didn't hear from you, who didn't catch the last show you were on, do you want to explain the tour?
The band that I'm in toured in Belgium, Holland, and Germany for 2 weeks, playing many shows and taking some time off.
Yeah, and then did Mercury turn retrograde while you were gone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I think, right as we're leaving.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Because, yeah, the shadow of the retrograde began on the 15th, and I definitely noticed that. I was like, Mercury retrograde's already happening. I went to see a client. I left my pen there. She had children, and I went back to retrieve my pen, and then I had to go and take because I was worried about it because of the children, you know. And then I immediately had to return something to the store, and then all this stuff started happening, and I was like, oh yeah, it's the shadow of the retrograde today. And you sometimes see that, like Mercury retrograde stuff extending into that pre-period. But I thought, eventually I realized that, especially because it's Mercury's in detriment in Sagittarius, that shadow is going to be more sensitive than a normal shadow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the 15th was the first day of driving the van in Belgium. And yeah, it just like our GPS wasn't working, and so trying to read the signs, and there were barely any signs, and some of them were tiny on buildings. And so yeah, it was, I think I drove on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. That's pretty Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
The cars are on the sidewalks, the people are in the street. But Belgium is the same side of the road as here, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So yeah, you didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just like a definite pileup of Sagittarian energy, and it's all in the latter degrees of Sagittarius and the third decan. So it's very much like this like slog to get things finished, which is appropriate for right before winter solstice, right before essentially starting, getting to the holidays and then starting a new calendar year. Because
getting that last bit of wood in, perhaps.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, preparing
That's
for
really
winter.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, getting everything done. And then it takes on the significations on the other side, because Saturn is kind of more like not as preparatory, but just like, did you do it? Like, did you get everything ready? Like, it's winter now. Like, are you are you good? Are you going to survive, or is this going to be really a trial?
Yeah.
Did you get your wood in, Suzanne?
I got my wood in.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thanks. How about you?
We did, but I think we need to order more, which is feeling pretty like Mercury retrograde too. It's like,
yeah,
okay,
and we just found out that like our regular plow scene isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
cloud scene's not set up here.
Yeah.
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 So it's just like we were very spoiled. We had kind of this
neighbor plow deal,
dreamy setup, and yeah, the fantasy's over. So. But
the fantasy is over. That's very Saturn entering Capricorn.
Yeah, but it's good,
Right.
because in the long run, we're just going to be stronger people from shoveling,
from that
massive storms out of there.
Yeah, a lot of structure added to our muscle fibers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
From this reality check that we're about to get.
Yeah.
But we say the fantasy's almost over, but with this Jupiter in Scorpio for the year, aspecting Neptune multiple times by trine, that we're definitely there's going to be some fantasies, and they might be kind of dark, and there might be a lot of kind of like counterintelligence, kind of espionage mixed in. Like,
Weren't we talking about that as far as the Gucci collection and the new Yeezy collection?
Yeah, it was the Kanye West collection.
Well, but both of them, because
for
Jupiter
different
and Scorpio.
reasons.
Yeah, but the Kanye West for season 6, his season 6 collection, tricked the paparazzi basically into photographing and putting out his new line
Oh, wow.
just by putting it all on Kim. And so Kim just like was like
And
going to the store.
Kim
and
who?
Kardashian.
Yeah.
And,
Just in case people don't know what we're talking about.
And you know, so she's just doing what she does, and the paparazzi love her, but she's wearing all of the new seasons, and so there was like, I think like 16 new looks or something like that, and he just put her in those every, you know, or they together came up with this idea, hopefully, and and
he didn't just dress her up, like send her out the door.
Yeah. Oh, well, Karine Rottfield had to do with it too.
Right.
She was there styling every moment, and yeah, but so he didn't have to make a lookbook or have this some kind of fashion show because the paparazzi just put it out. It's in every magazine. It's on every website. It's just out there. It's bigger than it would have been if he had just put it this isolated collection.
Yeah, and that's funny that you even said bigger than it would have been, because it's Jupiter expands stuff and makes it large and makes it grow. And that was, Jupiter is, in this year-long kind of trine by sign, and then, it's going to make aspect by trine to, and it just recently did to Neptune, which, you get illusion and fantasy and cinema and photography, because photography is an illusion of reality. And then you have Scorpio, which can be like secrecy, and, that Scorpio can be very much like the behind the scenes kind of like tricking, because it can be like the ninja, or it can be like counterintelligence, espionage, what's hidden and what's like obsessive and what's like under the radar. And so, yeah, like doing it this way and then it being like even bigger than if you had done it the normal way,
Yeah. Do you think it's a good balance for Saturn going into Capricorn?
Yeah, I think
to have that, or
yeah, I like it. I think it's there's some extremes to it, because it is Jupiter in a Mars sign, a Mars ruled sign. So you have the slower moving, larger traditional planets both in signs of malefics. So it's going to be intense. It's intense, but where Mars, Scorpio particularly, where Mars like burns things and cuts them and separates them and kind of breaks them up, and Jupiter in that sign is gonna like try to make things coherent through that death rebirth process, but part of that is by destroying it, but it's destroying ideas, it's destroying philosophies, kind of like pulling up layers and looking at things that are uncomfortable to look at and kind of being like, well, let's do something good with this, because Jupiter brings in opportunity and is ultimately benefic, and you grow. So yeah, Jupiter growing through that process, and then Saturn kind of stabilizing and testing and adding architecture through the process of just kind of like cold hard reality. That combo is intense. It's not like Saturn in a Venusian sign and Jupiter in its own sign or something, but which we're going to get next year. Next year you're going to get Jupiter in Sagittarius in rulership. So I think this year is going to be intense, and then next year, Saturn's going to have made some progress by then, and people are going to be getting used to it. But
it's dignified.
But I like this Saturn coming back to Capricorn, because we've been talking about how Saturn is typically thought of as conservative in Capricorn, but what we talk about as conservatives politically or conservatives in society are actually quite flamboyant.
Or they have. I think that there was a time, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah, I read that even Nixon had signed bills to, help green or clean energy. That long ago, and
right.
So it became. We don't have to get into it, but they just were bought out.
Yeah, I think this is going to be,
but kept the name,
right? Yeah, this is going to be the conservative,
it's like Market Basket.
Yeah,
no, it's not, because that was Gamula's. Yeah,
yeah. Only people in New England are going to be like cracking up right now. But yeah, it's more like I predict, or at least like half of it, because half of it's going to be uncomfortable. It's Saturn. Half of it's going to be like, ouch, like restrictions, but half of it will be it'll ultimately be for the good. And I think Saturn's going to be pretty much like, it's Saturn in an earth sign. Saturn's going to come around and be like, look at the mess we've made of the earth right now, and be like, okay, we need to put some restrictions on stuff. And I mentioned in the forecast, like, this is just an example, but it wouldn't surprise me if this were actually how it played out. That it's one, like suddenly it's like every person or every household has an amount of fuel they can use per year or buy per year, and that's it. And you have to strategize, where you can't just burn as much fuel as you can afford to burn anymore, where it's not, where you just kind of have to be like, okay, well, this is my allotted energy usage amount, and you just have to like strategize your life around it. And
maybe they'll just start taxing you, and then it would just become more financially sound to use less energy.
Right. Yeah.
But you're basically saying
yeah, something like that.
It will be monitored,
because
and you will have to pay.
Saturn's in rulership for 6 years. Think about like where we're at is as far as that right now. It's pretty much, other than complete lunatics, it's like pretty much global, collective, out in the open knowledge that something needs to be done drastically, and then it's like okay, well, Saturn's back,
Yeah.
After 24 years.
Yeah,
I thought you were dead.
Yeah, 24
it's
years
amazing.
since Aquarius, but even longer since he ingressed into Capricorn.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's 24 years since the end of his rulership period, his 6-year rulership period last time. So okay. 1998 was last time he ingressed into Capricorn.
1988.
I mean 1988.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a welcome. For sure.
Well,
yeah, it's like we need it. It's like I was explaining it to someone. It's like the job where everything's a mess because there's no manager, and then when a manager shows up, you're kind of like, well, now we
this
actually
stinks. Like we can't like smoke constantly or
no,
take all these breaks.
But you're actually
then
happy because you're not just standing there not knowing what to do, and you don't ever have anything you need.
Right.
Yeah.
But even if you didn't, if you're of the school of that company that you don't like what's going on, in the end you'll be happier because it will be a more, peaceful environment, and that things will be getting done.
Things are in order.
Things are in order, and that many of us work well in that sort of scenario.
And the days go by faster ultimately because you have responsibility.
Well, you're
up to something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm excited about it, and I think also people are going to kind of get really constructive with their own life, and you already see people are starting to like quit things and like quit smoking and quit drinking and
Gucci
whatever.
as band has said that they will are banning fur from all of their collections beginning in 2018 collections, and that's amazing. Wow. Just somebody as a house as big as Gucci, that's going to set a trend, because now fur is basically passé, except for, there's definitely going to be some enclaves where fur rules. You can wear in these private little houses.
Like Siberia.
Yeah, it's like eyes wide shut. You can wear all your fur there, but
right. Yeah, behind closed doors.
Yeah, exactly. For your eyes only.
Yeah.
But
but that's very Saturn and Capricorn. I was saying to Bondi about this earlier today, that it's with Saturn and Capricorn, that's said with like enthusiasm and resolve. You're like, yeah, and we're banning this, and everyone's like, great, that's perfect, good for you. We're like, if we weren't about to enter this Saturn to Capricorn phase, and someone was like, we need to ban this, like, no to that, someone would be like, oh my God, like, you're a fascist, but it's this like enthusiasm around restrictions now,
Yeah.
Making it fashionable.
So it's not going to necessarily
Right.
Did you
hurt
see
as
that,
much.
though?
It's just going to
Yeah.
feel, restrictions are going to feel normal and natural.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Have you thought about herbal approaches to Saturn and Capricorn?
Let's see, where did I put that? Well, I was thinking about bases. I was thinking about grains a lot.
Mhm.
Just making, it seems like with Capricorn, it's focusing a lot on structure, on form. So kind of like the barley, rye, oats, like whatever grains people can actually take into their bodies. Horsetail, just that kind of red clover, helping with a lot of like calcium and silica.
Yeah, horsetail's interesting. Is that kind of like is a boundary herb, huh?
As in helping to form boundaries?
Or like growing around boundaries?
Going at the edges of forests.
Yeah, definitely. And it grows like wetland edges.
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean. Yeah, wetland edges and roadsides and stuff.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
have a bunch of it growing here. It's lovely.
And then,
Yeah.
So explain to me again about grains.
I was just thinking with how they're we're kind of the basis of like human consumption.
Oh, okay.
A lot began with grains.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and
like
kind of going back to like basic structure.
Yeah, back to like the structure of the diet. Yeah, that makes sense.
And a lot of them are really grounding and they're really fortifying. If people are able to, some people can't take certain grains, but
Right.
Even I've been drinking like this roasted barley, rye, and chicory drink a lot
Beyond
lately.
coffee.
Yeah, beyond coffee, exactly.
So good.
Yeah, that was like
really
that was like a plug. That's like what
I know. Like,
they should.
It was a loving plug, okay?
Yeah, a
Because
loving
I love
plug.
them. They're amazing too.
They should sponsor us.
Yeah, because we record at night, so we can't drink coffee. You have to drink beyond coffee.
Yeah. I like the idea.
Alfalfa.
I like the idea of the barley too, because it's such a classic and with ancient precedents as like a offering to the dead. That it's like that aspect of Saturn is of mortality in the past and ancestry and where you came from and like the foundation of things and of your being. That's an interesting one to incorporate. What about for bone health and like strengthening bones?
Solomon's seal. I would recommend alfalfa. Red clover has a lot of calcium. Oat straw or milky oat tops.
I
Horsetail.
love milky oats so much. That's my number one favorite herb right now.
Yeah, milky.
Good.
We've been looking into. I don't think I have it in front of me, but we've been looking into milky oats in connection with things that are attributed to the first decan of Capricorn, or the first couple decans of Capricorn that oddly have a very milky theme. Like there's a milky stone, like a geode, and then what was the other aspect of it? I can dig it up, but we're thinking about like the goat symbolism, and then it was a stone that was milky that was crushed up and fed to goats
To help with lactation.
Yeah, to help with lactation.
Mm-hmm.
And that decan, like through anatomy, through astrological decanic medicine correspondence, was helped with the elbows. I think it's the later decans of Capricorn, and we were thinking about like the way your arms are if you were to be milking an animal, or just what reasons, like it would be elbows, goats, milk, and then
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the oat straw is interesting there too, because there's obviously a connection between, and that's what the solstice is all about. Essentially, is the connection between the sign of Cancer and the sign of Capricorn, and of course, Cancer, you're like, oh yeah, milk, the moon, the mother, like very very lunar, but getting this lunar in the opposites between, in the bones, like Capricorn and Saturn, the bones, and then the calcium builds the bones. There's certainly this connection, and then something I've definitely been exploring is like Saturn is female incarnations and aspects of Saturn, and any road I can find into there becomes really interesting. But you definitely see that, like for instance, like the bone births the flesh, the like time births manifestation,
Yeah, I was also thinking about with the transition, like calling upon maybe not even medicinally. I mean, all of these could, of course, could be medicinally, but it depends on your constitution. But as like just a spirit-based, or I was thinking bone set and black cohosh and melon root as kind of like bone setters. Like they have this plant intelligence for setting bones, almost like setting the structure for Saturn to come into Capricorn in your life.
Wow.
Or setting like into proper place, like how things are going to really be about structure. Is that in the proper place? Is that in a functioning, thoughtful place for action?
Yeah, like putting it where you want to put it, or putting it where you need it.
Yeah. So even have like a talisman with bone set, or black cohosh, or mullein root, or Solomon seal in there to help be like, okay, I also am calling upon you to help set this into action, set this into its proper place where it will offer me the most strength, and I will be able to offer the most strength.
Yeah, I like that, like one calling upon a group of plant allies. And like kind of one facilitates the other's job, or one does this to like kind of a platform so that the other one can do something else,
Yeah.
Which is very Capricornian too, because it's like hierarchy,
Right.
It'll probably respond well to thoughtful matrices of, to like articulation of how everything fits into tiers and fits into kind of like, into structures. What else do we want to talk? Well, do
you want to talk about the solstice?
Yeah,
I think we could really spend a lot of time talking about that.
Yeah, and we
have like skipped over other things, but I think that this is more like the highlight section.
It's certainly the highlight. Yeah.
Because I know that you don't.
It's like where you draw this circle around and then the arrow and like the X, and you're like, that's right when it happens.
Yeah,
See,
like the flare.
Let's get the replay. The flare. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is all kind of about talking about the solstice in a way. I mean, it's really just kind of like a super solstice, It's like you have the new moon happening right before the solstice, with the moon coming, the new moon is the moon conjoins the sun. It immediately after hits Saturn, and then after that, Saturn goes into Capricorn, and then right after that, the sun goes into Capricorn and conjoins Saturn, which is like essentially the new Saturn, the way it's the new moon. Saturn's been combust the whole time. It's been this, the sun has come near to it, and it's been in combustion at the end of Sagittarius, and then moves into Capricorn, and the whole time the sun is burning away all its impurities and beginning a new cycle of Saturn. So it's a new cycle of Saturn annually. It's a new cycle of Saturn because for the sun, for the soul, like the sun in Capricorn. So it's like it's like Saturn 3 ways. So it's really crazy. It's like a really crazy return. It's kind of like Saturn returning to his throne in full regalia, with like a procession, with with the king and the queen being like, come on, like it's everyone's bowing to him, like the lord of our solar system, like the lord of our known universe is bowing to Saturn as he returns. So I mean, in that sense, I do see why it's a welcome return. Astrologically, it looks like that. He doesn't just like, with no one else around, with everyone on the other side of the zodiac, he just like slips into Capricorn. This is like, everyone's there. All the planets are like,
amazing.
Not Jupiter and Mars are a little further back, but all the planets are this, like the planets that stay close to the sun and then the moon are all come over and they kind of usher him in, so this, and it all takes place right at the solstice, which is,
that's wonderful imagery.
All the spirits of the first decan of Capricorn are going to be major at this point, which is typically the headless one, which is certainly one of the most ancient spirits that we know of, like in human culture. That's pretty much only really venerated now in the Western occult traditions, the Western magical traditions, and it's pretty crazy moment for this like kind of ascension and descension of light and the height of the sun and the gateways of like the ecliptic and the crossroads of the Milky Way and the ecliptic, and it's quite a moment,
Yeah.
I was curious a little bit. I was curious about December 20th, going back a little bit, and we were talking about. You write, when the revolution achieves what it desires, what do people do with their love of passion and anger? And so that seems hopeful in a way that something wonderful could happen with that.
Yeah, I mean, that aspect ultimately is overshadowed by the solstice and by the new moon and Saturn.
It's Venus squaring Chiron and trining Uranus.
Yeah, it's
Uranus, whatever.
Yeah, it's certainly overshadowed in the moment, but it is Venus's chance to get in position to square Chiron and trine Uranus as the Sun and Mercury had previously done, and Uranus had been big this past year because it was opposed to Jupiter the whole year and played a big and was a trine to Saturn, so it played a big role. So it just is still in a sensitive position. So all the planets going by it and touching it in these aspects are meaningful, but at that moment it might not really be so noticed, but it could be, because I think Venus's interaction, because Uranus was opposed to Libra the whole year, it was very much this battle of like polarization and individuality and feminist issues were certainly huge, and that was
massive.
It's Venus's sign, Libra, getting opposed constantly, and Jupiter's philosophies in Libra. It wasn't just about justice, even though it was about justice, and it wasn't just about like equality, even though it was about that as well. It was Uranus really getting at times very binary and opening up, like Venus is female and Mars is male, and just being like, okay, it's Venus's sign getting opposed, and then now Venus is in position in Sagittarius to be like, because Sagittarius can be that like questing, that big adventure. Adventure is not the right word for this particular significance, but like that like motivational drive towards like achievement and philosophical completion of like we're gonna accomplish it. It's very romantic.
Have you heard of the hashtag she persisted, or she persists, I think?
No.
It's beyond me too. It's she persists.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely appropriate for this time period.
Yeah, and this will be Venus kind of everyone coming up to this Chiron Uranus like square and trine respectively is like very much like harmonized with that revolutionary blast from Uranus, but having to deal with letting go of what was the past. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's like, I guess that's just what I was saying there, is just that it's like, okay, we're winning. Now we have to let the old world go. You know, even the people whose fight it is, they have to let the fight go. You know, like,
Yeah.
like you're like,
Yeah, what now?
like, when do you stop fighting? Like, you know, how and start living with the changes that you've created. You know, that the positive changes. You know.
It's incredible. But now is there? Oh, Suzanne, I did want to ask. I know that a lot of people will be traveling to visit whoever they're planning to visit for the holidays. And I was hoping that you could offer some herbal helpers for traveling.
Yeah, I think that carrying some oak with you would probably be really good to keep kind of a stabilization of being.
What form would you do? Or do you have a suggestion in form?
I would either, like, if you had an oak that you love nearby, you could do an acorn, you could do a little piece of a branch, you could do a piece of the bark. You know, your picture of the tree, I don't know, just calling upon oak, I think, is wise right now. Then I think hawthorn is great to bring with you for your heart. A lot of people, it's pretty intense visiting family. And skullcap, just for relaxing one's nervous system.
Yeah,
and
that definitely sounds
good. Cocktails.
Okay, good cocktail.
Yeah. I think red drinks are really good this time of year. So hibiscus, rose, hawthorn berry.
Yeah.
So lovely.
Yeah, the Christmas, you know, this is a little bit like a day after, I think, this forecast, where this brings us up to the 24th, like Christmas Eve, you know, but on Christmas.
The 23rd, yeah.
Or the 23rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you're
right, the 23rd. On Christmas, Saturn conjoins, or Venus catches up and conjoins Saturn in the first degree of Capricorn. So it's like, that's going to make for a really traditional Christmas.
Yeah, I thought it could be just like military love. Not in, if you would put that into non-military people, you know, it's like, I love you, you know, we are family.
Yeah, marching around the tree.
Yeah. We are one. Yeah, we are a unit.
But it really could be a restriction on the really, really good times, and like kind of appreciating the more traditional aspects. Just like, you know, it might not be like really like a reveling and carousing, but kind of being like, yeah, I just really love the look of like the tree, the classic lights on the tree or something.
I feel that already.
The trees, like the wassailing.
Yeah, totally.
I want fairy lights in this house because I just love them so much. Yeah,
like that's the thing we'll absorb from it.
Yeah. I wish we had a mini tree.
But yeah, it's just interesting to see. It's like there might be like a more sober vibe, and that could be a bummer for some people, but it also might be like there's going to be parts of you that appreciate that vibe. And I think it really is going to have a lot to do with in a bigger level, it might even be stuff that sneaks into the news, is because Venus in Capricorn really looks at materials and the worth of materials. Like what are the value of things? What is the value of
true value?
Yeah,
do
like
you think? Not as far as just monetary.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you're like, you get something and you're like, what is this made of? And you're like, oh, the quality of this this is such nice wood, or this is has
Beautiful silk.
this stone in it, or it's really like the materials of the earth and like what they're worth, so that might be an issue
aren't for
somehow. And just to mention also that Saturn in Capricorn is generally it walks into Capricorn with a bit of a recession in the economy, and that combination of like, okay, Saturn's in Capricorn, money is tight, like what's really valuable. I was even saying it would I don't, just as an example, I could see something like a hashtag like my present is don't buy me a present, you know what I mean, like things like that, just being like my present is like to not
be in the present,
to not like waste something,
Yeah.
Not to talk too much about Christmas.
And we do have on Saturday, Mercury turns direct at 7 p.m. No, Friday. Yeah. Friday, Mercury turns direct, so we'll be out of this Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, and it's still Mercury
is
in detriment, but it's Mercury moving forward, and Mercury does a better job the second time it passes through, but it's still kind of, as far as the communication aspects of Mercury, it's still going to be trying to convince. You're still going to see a lot of people trying to just convince each other of stuff, but be a little bit more true to reality. Well, speaking of true to reality, it looks like we're about to run out of time.
Oh, damn. Solstice.
Yeah.
Time stopping.
Yeah, totally.
But looking forward to the next talk. I mean, maybe we can have an extended conversation with you, Suzanne, about 2018. Because
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can do a long episode next time.
we're looking
Yeah, that sounds great.
it won't be on the radio, but we can have it on the website and on YouTube.
All right, well,
Yeah.
thanks, Suzanne. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Liminal Light. Our theme music was composed by the ever-talented Asa Irons. Today's background sound was created by Charles Allin. Our guest was Suzanne Stone of Moon of Hyldemoer Herbals. I'm your host, Chrissy Puchere Rapucci, and you can find me at atavisceral.com, atavisceral.com, where I post articles and forecasts, offer chart readings, talismanic concoctions, occult services, tarot, divination, and more.